I'm Dan Baker. I am a combat veteran of the YPG International. I was in the U.S. military a decade before that. I'm a multiple times gold medal jiu-jitsu champion, and I am live streaming my daily routine of meditation, yoga, and martial arts. I'm also a member of the Revolutionary Communists of America, and please like, share, and subscribe so I can keep doing this. And we will begin here in just a minute while we listen to some revolutionary.
That's not the case at all.
Listen to some revolutionary content.
In 1957, the computer scientist Herbert Simon said the following: "There are now in the world machines that think, that learn and create. Moreover, their ability to do these things is going to increase rapidly until in a visible future, the range of problems they can handle will be coextensive with the range to which the human mind has been applied." That was in 1957. In 1970, Marvin Minsky, an early pioneer of AI, said the following as well: "In 3 to 8 years, we will have machines with general intelligence with the general intelligence of an average human being. I mean a machine that will be able to read Shakespeare, grease a car, play office politics, tell a joke, have a fight. At that point, the machine will begin to educate itself with fantastic speed. In a few months, it will be at genius level, and a few months after that, its powers will be incalculable." That was in 1970. So it was in this time-honoured tradition of ludicrous speculation that on the 29th of October of this year, so about 2 weeks ago, the CEO of SoftBank, which invests heavily in tech companies, confidently said, and again I quote, that artificial superintelligence, which would be 10,000 times smarter than a human brain. By the way, what does that mean? 10,000 times smarter than a human brain? Does that mean it thinks the same thoughts but 10,000 times more quickly? That it has 10,000 times better memory? Or that its thoughts are just somehow 10,000 times better than ours? Anyway, he said that will be coming in 2035. Apparently, he knows that. So 11 years, 10,000 times human intelligence. Much like nuclear fusion, artificial general intelligence, i.e. super intelligent conscious AI, is 10 years away and always will be. Similarly, Elon Musk, the patron saint of tech bros, said at the same event, so just 2 weeks ago, that AI will be able to do anything a human can do within a year and be equal to the intelligence of all humans combined, whatever that means, 3 years after that. Quite a claim. Although if you think about it, it's not actually that impressive, because presumably the intelligence of all humans combined includes Elon Musk, who alone must be responsible for bringing down the level to quite a low number. But funny as this is, obviously AI has advanced in the last 10 years, everybody knows that's quite dramatic. Its capacities have developed, but what it really is doing and what it really is useful for and how it actually should be deployed is something that is not very well understood, especially by these tech bros who are responsible for it, who don't really seem to actually have any idea of what consciousness is at all. And what consciousness is, of course, is really what we're interested in discussing today. It's really the key philosophical question that there is. And the problem of the mind and the relationship between mind and body is known in philosophy as the hard problem, right? The sort of central problem that no one's really been able to resolve. However, although it is a difficult problem, and the nervous system is very, very complex, I would say that the main reason for the difficulty, the philosophical difficulty, is really political, which is that we live in a class-divided society, and the bourgeois mindset is characterized by a lack of understanding of humanity and of itself and of its own system, with all kinds of illusions, basically. And it's those illusions which are fostered even quite deliberately, and you have religion and all kinds of things, and alienation. That is the real obstacle that confuses us about what our own consciousness really is. It's not so much a technical, scientific difficulty. But yes, what is consciousness? That's the question I really want to try to answer today. And of course, we're materialists. And therefore, the question of materialism is obviously about what is consciousness, really, because it's a statement that what is materialism? It means that consciousness is dependent upon the material world. It is an expression of the material world. It has no independence from it, cannot exist separately from it at all, and is part of the material world. That's the materialist position. So obviously it's an interesting question to us, and I think it's important because if you think about it, really all the attacks on Marxism do boil down to idealism, even when they appear not to. For example, the idea that there's a human nature which is greedy, and that's why you can't have socialism or communism. That idea, that sounds like a materialist idea because you're talking about human nature, you know. Sounds quite realistic, but actually what you're saying is that there's a fixed human nature which is independent of the changing world and all the changes that we have made to society and to ourselves, which are huge and undeniable. But despite that, human nature just somehow is always the same. That's basically what that position. That's an idealist position, really. Or the idea that Marxists are economic reductionists, and we don't take proper account of things like culture. You know, for example, people trying to explain why Trump won. A lot of people say, oh, it's a bit reductive to talk about the economy. It's really because of some sort of machismo or something like that in American culture. I'm not going to go into how right or wrong that analysis is, but that kind of criticism of Marxism, again, it may not appear to be overtly idealist, but it is because it's saying that, of course, we accept that culture plays a role in human history, and ideas, as we're going to discuss today, have a very real effect. It's not just doesn't just boil down to the economy and nothing else. But what they're really saying when they assert that is that these things, these cultural phenomena, these narratives, can't be explained in terms of material processes ultimately at all, which is what we're interested in doing. They do come from somewhere. They do have a certain power for certain material reasons, but they're trying to deny that. As soon as you say that, that's reductionism, apparently, right? So that's also an idealist attack on Marxism. So I think it's very important that we do understand what consciousness is in materialist terms. Now, today, idealists will say that they base themselves to a large extent on the scientific difficulties in explaining consciousness. As I've mentioned, there are tremendous difficulties and uncertainties there. And that's like their last readout. They will say, this shows that there is a soul or something beyond the conscious world, something that consciousness can't really be explained materially. And what they will say is that, yeah, you can explain the eye, the optical nerves materially, you can explain what photons are, but there's still something ineffable, something sort of indivisible, this meanness, this I that attends all experience, that you don't, otherwise we'd just be like a digital camera, wouldn't we, which does record very accurately what is out there visually, but of course the camera doesn't see anything really. It reproduces an image, but it never feels what it sees. It doesn't mean anything to it, whereas things feel a certain way to us when we look at them, which you can't capture by explaining what photons are, for example, right? And so what they say is there's something else, there's something beyond the physical there that gives you yourself, essentially, and that makes things feel a certain way to you. So we have to try to answer that. And there's also here a kind of an implicit dualism, which many people fall into, many materialists accidentally fall into. Dualism means when you basically divide reality into two realms. The material realm, as Descartes explained, with extension, you can measure it. But then a realm of ideas which can't be measured. You can't measure a consciousness. You can't measure an idea. It doesn't exist in space. There's that idea that there's these two realms. And we do tend to slip into this way when we think about ourselves and our consciousness, that there's something immaterial about it, fundamentally. But of course, that position it's an admission of defeat. It's like a kind of label for what we don't understand and nothing more. It doesn't explain anything. There's a soul or something within me that makes things feel a certain way, and has certain ideas just because of its own inherent consciousness, of course explains nothing. Why you would think this and not that could never be explained by such a position. If the source of my feelings and my thoughts is having a soul, then why one day do I react differently to the same basic stimuli as on another day? If the soul has remained the same, surely the soul is not materially caused. It doesn't grow or shrink or anything like that. Nothing that doesn't explain it at all. In fact, it's incapable. It erects a barrier to explanation. And again, this similarly, the idea of sort of Cartesian theatre is very hard for us to escape from. This is the idea which was coined by the philosophy of mind Daniel Dennett, that basically the way we tend to think about consciousness is as if there's a little person inside your head who is like watching he's like sitting in a miniature cinema, who is getting a projection of what the eyes see and what the ears hear, and is then observing it. And it's that little person, that mini you, that somehow makes it all feel a certain way, right? That somehow takes decisions, and without that, all we are is basically automatons. We're just machines that, just like a digital camera or a microphone, that just register photons and sound waves, etc. But the thing that gives it meaning and feeling is that mini you inside your head. It's just another version of the same idea, really. And you see that it's very, I think we tend to think about it in that way unavoidably almost. And you see it all the time. You see it, of course, in the films Inside Out, very popular films. Very philosophically suspect, I must say. But the point that Daniel Dennett brilliantly makes, and I would recommend his writings on this, he's a very materialist writer, is that, of course, it makes no sense, because if there's an inner you that sort of is watching everything, then how does that person perceive what they're seeing? Is there a miniature person inside their head that then watches what they see in the cinema? And of course, inside your head is pitch black. There are no colours. When you see something purple, it's not like a part of your brain sort of becomes purple. It doesn't. It's not like that. I was watching Terminator 2 the other day, which is a lot of relevance to AI, which we can go into later. But there's also you see the same thing when it's depicted as if you're inside the Terminator's head. There's always writing like, "Oh, target identified," but why does the Terminator need to see that? The Terminator would just know that he's identified the target. It's again that reproduces the idea there must be like a mini Terminator in his head. He's like watching this display with all the information nicely spelt out for him. But again, that just makes no sense, because there'd have to be another one inside here. This doesn't explain it. We have to be able to explain consciousness in terms of unconscious, arising out of that which is unconscious. We can't rely on some magical mini me or soul or whatever it is inside the brain somewhere and you still see scientists, neuroscientists look at where is consciousness in the brain, and there's this location or some special aspect of the brain, of its structure, which produces consciousness. That's magical thinking, and we can't proceed on that basis. It doesn't explain anything. Now, it may sound as if therefore what I'm saying could align with these sort of tech bros who are obsessed with AI becoming conscious, because if I'm saying that consciousness arises out of unconscious processes and there's no sight of consciousness, there's no little mini me basically, then that does imply that, well, what we're producing could also, with AI, could also become conscious, because that's obviously built out of different parts, none of which is conscious. Could it not therefore be as they imagine that will eventually produce consciousness? But actually, I think that those people who look at it in that way, and it's not just the people who are obsessed with AI, you get neuroscientists and cognitive scientists who also look at it that way. Like I said, they're searching for some part of the brain that does it. They still also rely on this kind of magical thinking. This idea that if you listen to these people, these AI guys, they'll always be like, oh, well, there's not enough parameters yet. I saw one of them saying, oh, yeah, but actually the brain has like 30 trillion synapses or some figure like that, whereas the number of parameters that ChatGPT-4 has is 1 trillion or something. So we need to get 30 times more and then it will be conscious. That's sort of how they think. It's just a technical thing, basically. You just add enough transistors, enough parameters, enough software tricks. And also the same is thought about the brain, that the brain somehow produces consciousness in that way. And it sounds materialist, but it isn't. I'll give an example. Max Tegmark is a celebrated physicist and AI researcher. Really a great example of this. He claims that actually maybe what consciousness is a fourth state of matter alongside solidity, liquidity, and gas. And he calls it perceptronium. And this is a quote from sciencealert.com about his ideas. It says, he proposes that consciousness can be interpreted as a mathematical pattern, the result of a particular set of mathematical conditions. Just as there are certain conditions under which various states of matter, such as steam, water, and ice, can arise, so too can various forms of consciousness, according to him. So this appears to be materialist, of course. He's talking about the states of matter, after all. But actually, it's just relying on some miraculous substance he has not explained and not understood, that a special mathematical trick that is conscious. Why? Don't know, just it's out there somehow. Nothing is explained and understood by us. Another example from the New Scientist in 2018, they said the following: a widely held view, apparently, that's astonishing to me, sees consciousness as the unintended byproduct of information rushing through the closed loop of connections that is the brain. Consciousness can't help existing despite serving no particular purpose, just like the noise emitted by a running engine which has no bearing on the workings of the engine itself. That is an astonishingly stupid thing to think. To look around at the whole history of humanity, the way that we've spread around the entire world, colonized every part of the earth, different climates, produced incredible things, ended diseases. But no, consciousness, I have no idea what purpose it serves. It's just like a noise that, I mean, that is a great example of the sort of reductionism that scientists tend to fall into, of just thinking that the only way to understand something is breaking it down into its parts. So the only way to understand consciousness is just by looking at neurons, basically. And then, the neurons aren't conscious, so consciousness either doesn't really exist or it's just a kind of meaningless effect. And of course, if that were true, then if really this is supposedly materialist viewpoint were accurate, then a brain in a vat that was fed the correct nutrients would have all the same consciousness and ideas that we have. A person brought up outside of society would have the same ideas that we have. And also, people 10,000 years ago would have the same culture and ideas that we have, because our biology hasn't really changed at all in that time. Evolution has stopped working because of civilization. It doesn't really apply to humanity anymore. So we have the same biology. Therefore, we would have the exact same idea. If all consciousness is just like the bile secreted by a liver, it's just a kind of fluid that, and there are other people who suggest it might be a fluid that the brain emits. I mean, it's ludicrous. So, yeah, these are like people who think that the most scientific and accurate way to understand a statue, a particular, like, let's say there's a statue of a political figure, would the most scientific and accurate way to understand that statue be to examine its, the rock composition of it under a microscope and actually this, and that explains why? No, the way would be to understand the history of that society, the politics, the social structure, etc., that would cause somebody to make a statue of that particular politician. Is the best economist somebody who says, well, the reason that you get economic crises, or the reason why this country's richer than another, is because if you look at the notes of their money under a microscope, you'll find that it's this way, and that's what obviously is ludicrous, right? That is not scientific at all. And this kind of problem of materialism is not a new one. Marx actually identified it way back when he wrote the Theses on Feuerbach, in which he said, in contradistinction to materialism, the active side, i.e. of consciousness, was developed abstractly by idealism. In other words, the materialism of his day tended to view consciousness as just a passive thing, just like these people I'm talking about, just something that is created by the world but plays no role. Trotsky also quite brilliantly understood this. In his philosophical notebooks, he says the following: Consciousness cannot be reduced to its physiological processes. It must have its own laws independent of those bodily processes. Otherwise, it would confer no advantage and would merely be a costly waste. And he said that, so consciousness has its own laws, unique in the material world. Does that make Marx and Trotsky idealists? Because they're denying the physiological basis of consciousness, seemingly. But no, it doesn't make them idealists. But as materialists, we do not deny the role of ideas. They do have a unique role. Otherwise, we wouldn't bother having this meeting. Obviously, we wouldn't bother writing books or anything. And, again, like the best explanation for why, I don't know, I might go to visit a friend wouldn't be to study my muscles and how they move and therefore how I've been able to walk. That'd be to understand the ideas I have. Or this person wants to visit that friend because they enjoy spending time with them, whatever. Ideas do have a causal power over material things, and it's not an idealist proposition to say that. Of course, you can't just have any ideas and do whatever you want. We can't just, impose feudalism back onto society. Obviously not. You have to have the right ideas, of course, or even if you've got wrong ideas, they can have an effect, but they just don't really have the effect that you intended them to. But ideas certainly do have a power, and that is the power of human culture. The reason they have such a power is because ideas are inherently social, right? That's the point. In other words, the reason they kind of transcend the physiology of the individual, as Trotsky was saying, is because the vast majority of our ideas are not our own. I'm standing up here, I'm speaking, obviously, I'm using language, which obviously I did not invent. It was the product of many, many people over a very long period of time. And the whole meaning of this event is it cannot be explained on the basis of myself alone, clearly. Almost everything that we do and think actually is borrowed from the treasure trove of human experience. So we take on ideas that we ourselves would not have been able to produce, and yet then having internalize those ideas, it changes our behavior. We physical behavior, So the ideas obviously do have their own laws, and they're not arbitrary, of course, which ideas we have. They do obey materialist laws, but they're not the laws of the individual's physiology, but the laws of human society, basically. But it's precisely this kind of reductionistic materialism, if you like, that I've been describing, that's responsible for these kind of alarmist headlines you constantly see about AI. That AI is about to be conscious. I mean, literally just when I was sat in the previous meeting thinking about this one, I looked, you look on Twitter, and because of people I follow, it does recommend me AI. And it's just, without even trying, I just instantly find people saying, super intelligent AI coming next year, apocalypse 1 year after that. You just relentlessly see this stuff. And it's a product of this failure to understand the function of ideas, the function of consciousness. That's how we really have to understand consciousness, not by breaking it down into the neurons that are working behind it, but to understand its role in society, basically. That's really how we have to understand it. And if we understand it in that way, that can also shed light on why AI is not conscious, nor is it becoming conscious. Because AI if you look at what is the function of AI, it's a tool. It's a passive thing. It's not an active living thing, basically. It passively collects data without having any idea of why it is doing so, or any desire to do it, or to care in the world if it is switched off and stops doing it. And that, by the way, so to go on for a moment onto some of the problems of AI, there is when I first did a talk like this a few years ago, and I had to explain about these kind of bizarre problems that AI produces, because at the time I don't think many people understood it. Now it's become quite widespread knowledge, these kind of images with mangled hands and writing which is just gibberish constantly. Ask it to spell how many letters R's are in strawberry, and even just about a month ago it was ChatGPT couldn't tell you how many R's are in strawberry. There's a couple of examples I'd like to give of this, which I think show, in light of what I've been saying about consciousness, why and how they are not conscious. It's not just a technical problem. If you ask it to, this may no longer be the case, this is from a couple of years ago, but it was the case that if you asked it to draw a bicycle, it would draw a bicycle. If you asked it to draw a wheel, it would draw a wheel. If you then said, okay, draw me a bicycle and the wheel with the wheels labelled, all it would give you was a bicycle with random labels that don't even say anything on it, just all over the picture. In other words, it doesn't actually understand what a wheel is. It knows the shape of a bicycle because it's seen lots of them, and it knows the shape of a wheel separately because it's seen lots of those. It doesn't understand what a bicycle is either, why it has wheels, what they're useful for. None of this means anything to it. That's why it trips up all the time with this kind of thing. But I think an even better example is if again, you can't really do this now because they've engineered them so that they don't give political answers or moral answers because they're worried it will tell you to like kill yourself or something. But if they took those away and you ask one of these large language models, as they're called, a political question or a moral question, a classic moral question like should people have the right to abortion or should you be able to kill someone for the greater good or something, it would give you a certain answer. If you then asked it another question that involved exactly the same moral problems, but in an applied way, it would often just give you a completely different answer. And nobody knows why that's the case. And they also use it for, they tried to use video making AI, text to video AI, to create, video content for adverts and stuff. And then every time they type in a prompt, they just get a different image or a different video, and they have no idea of why it's produced a different video. They can't make it produce the video that they want it to make. This is the point of the fact that it gives a different political or moral answer and contradicts itself, shows it doesn't have a definite viewpoint. It doesn't mean anything to it, what it's saying. Whereas a person, adopts some sort of political or moral principle, and okay, they might contradict themselves by mistake occasionally, but they generally know what they think about the right to abortion or other things like that. And when a question obviously involves that, they will give a consistent answer to it because they are in the world, but the AI obviously isn't in the world. It doesn't live, it doesn't care about what it's doing. That's the reason. It's not because they haven't added enough parameters to their algorithms, they haven't got enough processes behind them. There's a fundamental reason why it can't do this. Now, now it may sound as if I'm rather down on AI, like I just think, oh, well, it's just rubbish, basically, it's very stupid. That's not the case at all. It can do amazing things, and in fact, I think it is superhuman already in a lot of ways. I mean, it clearly is. You can ask it to do, I don't know, a Van Gogh painting of a cat, which obviously Van Gogh never did, and then it will do it, and it will look remarkably like a Van Gogh painting of a cat, and it will do it in a matter of seconds. That is incredible. It can, perceive patterns in, energy consumption and things like that, and produce a more rational, efficient way of running things in an incredible way that no human can. So it does do amazing things, and it is superhuman in that respect. However, it's not just that, oh yes, but it's not superhuman enough to be conscious yet. It's there in some ways, but not in others. The point is actually precisely in its superhumanness is its lack of consciousness, which people don't seem to realize. In other words, when they get AlphaGo to beat that person at Go, if you remember that this AI beat someone at this game called Go in 2016. That again is superhuman. People think, oh my God, it's conscious, it's going to take over the world. But why does it do that? Because it was trained relentlessly on nothing but Go. They made it play, I think, 30 million games of Go. No human being has the time to do that in their life. And also, if they tried, they'd get bored. They'd get hungry. They'd need to speak to their family and friends. And also, if you do practice something and you perhaps slightly change what you do to see if that thing works, if I do it like this, is that better? You can never quite be sure that that is actually the reason you did well, because your body is a very complex thing. Maybe you did it, but you were actually a bit tired without realizing it, and so you didn't do it as well as you thought. That's how it is to be a human. But obviously an AI is not like that. It is not alive. It does not have other concerns. It does not get tired. So it can run millions upon millions upon millions of iterations of itself and exactly measure what worked and what didn't. And that's why it can spot these patterns and behave in these amazing ways. Precisely because it isn't conscious, because it does not live, it does not care about anything. That's what we're really doing. We're making a tool, just like when people, this in the time-honored tradition of human tool making. That's what we do. We identify a problem. I need something. Humans are generalists, right? Our bodies are weak. We don't have massive claws, so we invent knives or daggers to allow us to fight other animals even more effectively. And so we identify a specific problem, we identify the material that's needed for it, and we make a tool. That tool is totally useless pretty much at doing anything else. A dagger obviously cannot talk, cannot think, can't even, hammer in a nail very well. But at that one thing it was designed for, it is extremely effective. That's basically what we're doing without realizing it. Ironically, we're not very conscious of what we're doing with this artificial consciousness. We are creating an elaborate, yes, admittedly a very advanced, more flexible tool, but it is still a tool. We identify a problem, we train it relentlessly on that specific problem, and it produces incredible results at that specific thing. They also have this problem of overfitting, which I think proves my point. And which overfitting means you train an AI and it becomes incredibly good at this one thing. If you just shift, even just slightly, the scenario, it often completely fails. It can't understand it. It gets it completely wrong. Whereas what we are able to guess at, often a person can just see something completely new, a new situation, and they guess at what is going on there. And those guesses are not always right, of course, but they quite often are. And what does that tell us? It tells us that we have a general understanding of the world and how things work based on our life experience, our needs, and our interests that allows us to sort of have informed guesses that, of course, are not always right, but they often are. AI is totally incapable of that. Anyway, back to what consciousness is. We have to understand, if we're going to understand what consciousness is, we've got to get away from this idea that it is a thing, if you like, or that it has like a soul, or it has some place that it resides. It is instead a process, and it's actually the result of a very, very long process, and we have to view it historically in its real, in a real scientific sense, in order to understand it. That consciousness emerges in history as the culmination of an evolutionary process. And actually, if you want to understand it, look at the earliest life forms, which were not designed, obviously. We're not supposed to do what they did. There's no magic trickery there. It's very easy to understand how they work. But they just replicated themselves, and therefore they grew in number, just because they could, once certain molecules came together. And then changes developed in them through random mutations, in which some of them had rudimentary senses that allowed them to move away from things that were damaging to them and towards things that were good for them. Of course, they didn't understand what they were doing, and nobody had designed it, but it worked, and that was more successful. And obviously, over a very long period of time, those rudimentary senses developed more and more complexity, so that we have, the incredible eyesight and hearing and everything else that advanced animals have. It's not, you can't find it anywhere. You can't find what life is, or what sensation is. It's not in a place. It's just a process. It's a principle of organization that exists in time, and that is the basis of consciousness. That rudimentary sensation, that first living thing that was able to see that, or feel in some way, that something was bad for it, and therefore to preserve itself actively. That is the sort of the bare building block, if you like, the first step on the path to consciousness. And that's what marks, again, consciousness out so distinctly from tools and from AI, which do not have that principle in them at all. So it's a product of the struggle for survival, of the need to live, and therefore to understand the world objectively in order to live better, basically, in order to survive. And what really distinguishes thought from sensation is the power of generalization. That's the fundamental thing. That's all the difference really is. In other words, rather than just sensing something is bad and not understanding it and just reacting to it in the moment, to have an idea of it is to be able to say, oh, that is like that other thing that I've seen before. And therefore to adopt general strategies rather than just to live in the moment, but to maybe collect certain things for tools so that in a month's time, you will then be better prepared to fight this thing that you need to fight in order to eat, etc. That's what consciousness is. It's the power of generalization. It's linking different things together and separating things out, basically, based on sensory experience. That's really at the heart of what consciousness is. Now, and what we have to understand is that the capacity to do that, to make that leap into generalization, and in turn into self-consciousness, which I'll come on to in a moment, comes not from some special trick in the brain, some special mechanism we've still not understood, but from society, from the interests and the experience of society, particularly as it labors, as it transforms the world. Now, we often hear that the brain is the most advanced and complex thing in the universe, which is true. However, I think that this can lead to misleading conclusions on consciousness, and it's also used, that fact is used by these kind of AI optimists, if you like, to say that, oh, that's the reason that we've not made conscious AI yet. It's just because the brain is that complex. Like I said before, 30 trillion, synapses. So we just need to build an increasingly more complex AI model, have more powerful processors, etc., and then it will be conscious. Now, the brain is very, very complex, but you also have to understand it was not designed to be conscious, because there is no designer in evolution. And what evolution does is it doesn't sort of, fashion body parts in advance in its head. Obviously, there is no head of evolution. It's a process. It doesn't do that like a designer and perfectly design something for one task. It takes hold of the existing biological material, often that was evolved for something else, and is transformed and used for some other purpose. And the brain is like that. The brain is full of things that really had evolved for other stuff. Our brain is not that different from other advanced mammals' brains. It is more complex, it's true, but it's not that different. And it has its limitations, right? The brain really has a lot of limitations and flaws to it. Communication between brain regions is actually relatively slow. And in particular, the capacities of an individual brain, if you like, lag enormously behind what that brain is used for. In other words, our ability to concentrate, to remember, to hold in consciousness many things is very limited. In writing this lead off, I obviously had to read some books, and if you asked me now what was in all of those books, I would really struggle to remember the vast majority of it. And everyone knows that, you read a book and someone says, oh, what was in that book? And you have this embarrassing moment, you're like, yeah, I can't really remember. And how therefore was it useful for me to read those books? Because I wrote notes of what I thought was important in the moment, and then I looked over those notes, and I came to certain conclusions, and I organized it. That's basically, and to be honest, I would struggle to tell you what I said in this lead off a few minutes ago, certainly not word for word. And I have not mapped out every single word that I'm going to say in the rest of the lead off. It sort of comes to me, right? I'll do a little thought experiment to show you, or an exercise to show you what this is like. So we often think that we picture things in our head, and that's what consciousness is like. And I think that's not quite true. So for example, imagine a crossword composed of 9 squares in a 3x3 formation, right? So 3 rows of 3 squares making up one big square of 9. And in this crossword is written the 3 words going downwards. So in each column, the words are gas, oil, and dry. If you've pictured that in your head, you should be able to immediately tell me what other words are spelt going from left to right, like that, or for you, like that. But it's quite hard, right? It takes a little while to do that, and you have to kind of go, okay, well, the first one was gas, and the second one was that. And in other words, you haven't actually pictured it in your head, or at least in a very rudimentary fashion have you done so. It's a real struggle to do that, and it takes time. Our ability to picture even people that we know very well when they're not there, or even somebody that you've just looked at, if you close your eyes, our ability to picture them is actually much more scanty than you might think. So if this is the case, then if the brain struggles to picture things and to memorize things, then how on earth are we as conscious as we are? How have we written whole books and done all these incredible things? Through the power of society and through labor and tool making. And in particular, when we make tools, We also make intellectual tools. That is to say, we have writing, we have numbers and maths, and we have other ways of recording things so that we remember them. And we make use, obviously, of language, which is a social phenomenon that no one person could have possibly come up with. And language allows us to organize our thoughts and to remember things and structure what we think. And we often find that as we speak, we then discover what we think. We didn't really even know in advance, if you see what I mean. It's only in elaborating it do we fully realize the significance of what we're saying, and we often then come to new conclusions. As Marx pointed out, society is not just an aggregation of individuals. We have to enter into definite relations with one another. We depend upon those relations and are totally changed internally by those relations that we stand in. And this is a dialectical contradiction, if you like, that on the one hand, the general, i.e. the human consciousness, the ideas that we have, the language that we have, can only exist in individuals, right? There is no super brain, some god that is thinking everything at once for us to sort of take bits of when we need them. Of course not. The only thinking things are individual human beings. And yet at the same time, those thinking human beings could not possibly think the things that they think without the rest of society to base themselves on, without the whole prehistory of humanity to base themselves on, and all the tools and all of the books, etc., that involves. And so, as Marx pointed out, to understand human essence, as he put it in the thesis on Feuerbach, you don't find it 100% in each individual taken separately. The human essence exists in the ensemble of social relations and never in any one person entirely. And therefore we should think of consciousness not really as an individual thing. That's another mistake, to take it in each individual. Consciousness as it exists is a social phenomenon. It exists in society. And we as individuals partake in that. We take the parts of it that we need as and when we need them. Of course, we each have our own ideas. That is true. We're not all the same as everybody else. But we can only have that individuality that we do have thanks to the rest of humanity producing the ideas, the music, the culture, the ideas, etc., that are there. And we take the ones that we want to take, basically. And despite what these scientists think, this idea that consciousness gives no survival advantage is absolutely ridiculous. It clearly does. And the last thing I want to explain in terms of consciousness is a question of self-consciousness, self-awareness, which again is treated in this mystical fashion as if there's some magical structure of the brain which produces self-awareness. And I've seen another thing said that, well, maybe what consciousness is a quantum, the brain is a quantum computer. You might have heard people speculate on this. And once you have a quantum computer, it just has the magical property of self-awareness. And therefore, I don't know if you know, but scientists are trying to create quantum computers, which would have special abilities. And some people said, oh no, but maybe when we do that, then it will be self-conscious and it will sort of enslave us all for some reason. That's what they say. But actually, self-consciousness there's no magic. It's not really that the brain, yes, it's very complex, but it's not really a product of the brain in that direct fashion. Self-consciousness, again, is a product of society. We, of course, as I've explained, we make use of the treasure trove of ideas, of abstractions, of generalizations, and of tools that human society has developed, and of language, which enormously accelerates your intellectual development. But also being socialized in that way gives you a sense of yourself. And it allows you to understand yourself as a consistent thing that exists over time, rather than just to be lost in the moment. You're given a name, you're told about your life history by your parents and others around you when you're young. You build up a definite picture of yourself. And again, like I said with everything else, that picture is sometimes a bit scanty. We sometimes struggle to remember what we were like in the past. And we get things wrong about ourselves, and we have, false memories and other sorts of things. So it's not an exact self-consciousness. It's flawed, but nevertheless, it's an enormously powerful thing to have, to be aware, both as a society and as an individual, of who you are, of what your mistakes are, of what your interests are, and therefore how you can adjust your behavior in order to live better, basically. is an enormously powerful thing. But it's not that the brain has got some secret source that makes that happen. It's rather a product of society. All the brain needs to be able to do is to have memories, to have the capacity to have memories, to obviously to have the technical capacity to use language, which I don't have time to go into. Of course, none of which I'm saying should be taken to understand that the structures of the brain are somehow irrelevant to consciousness. Of course not. But it's not by itself nearly enough to explain, and it's not really the driving force of consciousness. And I think, coming to an end then, this should help us to understand why even the most advanced AI is not conscious. It actually has an entirely different basis. It is not alive, it has no body, it has no feelings, it does not participate in some sort of struggle for survival or anything like that. It doesn't actually care about what it's doing. Today's AI, the point is not really whether it is more or less intelligent than a human being, which people seem to be obsessed with answering. As I've said, it is already superhuman in many ways. In other ways, it can be very, very stupid. But they're different things. They're fundamentally different things. It's an extension of our own consciousness that we have made, which, if used correctly, would have tremendous advantages for ourselves, allowing us to save energy, allowing us to discover new materials we never could have discovered. If we had a socialist society, it would allow us to plan the economy much better, because we could centralize all the data in real time and allow AI to spot patterns and efficiencies and other sorts of things. That is what it really is. It's a tremendously powerful thing, but it is also rather limited and one-sided. And that's not a bad thing. That's not a mistake. We don't want something that somehow is independently conscious. We already have human beings for that, and we know how to create new human beings. So where am I? Yes, just to sum up, there is no magic ingredient to consciousness, okay? There's no mystical properties to it that we haven't yet discovered. There's no perceptronium out there, no new state of matter that needs to be discovered and understood. It is not a direct product of the soul or some technical wizardry of the brain. And to understand it scientifically, we have to grasp the role of consciousness in society. But of course, to understand that is no mean feat, because to understand society, we're participants in society. And to understand anything, you need to be active. You don't understand something by just being passive and having no interest in it. And therefore, of course, it's no coincidence that the ones who really understand society the best are the ones who are struggling to change it, who then discover how society really is, if you like, without illusions. In other words, Marxists, communists. And it's in the struggle to change society that we really become truly self-conscious as human beings, where we really understand how society is without illusions, and when we take control of society in our own hands properly as a species, collectively, that is when we will really understand what we are doing and why, and adjust our behavior accordingly, so that we may finally live to our full capacities, and not live in this kind of confused and alienated existence that we do under capitalism.
The Revolutionary Communists of America are hosting Marxist schools in Los Angeles on October 11th and 12th, Chicago on October 25th and 26th, and New York City on November 8th and 9th. These schools of communism will be weekend-long educational deep dives to discuss the fundamentals of Marxist philosophy, revolutionary history, and strategy. Buy your tickets now at the link in the description to secure your spot.
The Wall Street Journal and a local Dallas paper just wrote articles about the revolutionary communists of America. They see the rising popularity of socialism and communism and are struggling to understand why 1 out of every 3 people that are under 30 have a favorable view of communism in the United States. To us, it's no wonder that people are sick of capitalism and want a revolution. Our generation has never known peace. We saw the 2008 crisis shatter the stability of the working class, and we've been living in the broken pieces ever since. We now pay more for housing and insurance than millennials, just 1 generation older than us, and we make less than them. College graduates are now more unemployed than the national average. Even when we're putting our heads down and grinding it out, we're still only just getting by. To top it all off, we have grown up watching the imperialist massacres carried out by our ruling class. From Iraq and Afghanistan to the genocide in Gaza, all funded by our tax dollars. And it's not just the youth that are disillusioned with this system. Only 54% of Americans have a positive view of capitalism. 70% said that the American dream no longer holds true or never did. Only 25% think that they have a good chance of improving their standard of living. And that's the lowest figure that's been recorded. The life promised to the working class of this country does not exist. And there is a growing layer in the US that can no longer just sit by and be passive observers of capitalist decline. But the two political parties in America have discredited themselves. They are correctly seen as corrupt, cynical tools of the billionaires. Trump, who rode the vote of disillusioned workers and youth, has suffered a 54-point negative swing with Gen Z voters between February and July of 2025, with his youth disapproval peaking at 72%. And despite what the even more discredited Democratic Party says, we are not in a period of fascist takeover. With his reactionary theatrics, Donald Trump is trying to distract the working class from economic pain that will only get worse. In reality, we're entering a period of class struggle. The revolutionary movements in Indonesia and Nepal, the Block Everything protests in France and Italy, will be coming to the United States sooner or later, and we are preparing for that. The youth are looking past the Democrats and Republicans and now see class struggle as the only way out. We want a revolution, and we're building the party that will ensure that that happens. Today, you're going to hear from comrades that are building at college campuses all over the country, not only training themselves, but going out and recruiting people that feel the same way that they do about the state of the world. In the last few weeks, in more than 50 campuses across the country, we have had over 2,500 people sign up to potentially join the Revolutionary Communists of America. But this is just the beginning. Now comes the real task, to recruit these comrades into the ranks of the party and begin their consolidation in the ideas of Marxism and the methods of Bolshevism. These young people had never been given the opportunity to change the world until now. By building a disciplined network of revolutionaries steeled in Marxist theory, capable of communicating those ideas to the broader working class, we can prepare for revolution. Now let's hear from our comrades in Dallas, Fort Worth, Chicago, Minneapolis, Philadelphia, Seattle, and New York City.
Around this area that I'm standing in, we had 18 comrades intervene at a university fair that they were doing in UNT called Mean Green Fling. We were able to make 90 contacts and sell 27 papers while being out here. We've also been tabling every Monday through Wednesday right over here. Pretty much at every tabling, comrades have gotten around like 10 or so contacts.
The people that are joining us are incredibly energized to go and build, to study theory. One comrade in particular, they're jumping out in front of the table, calling out to people, "Are you sick of capitalism?" It was really incredibly inspiring. Basically, 1 in every 2 people you ask, they hate capitalism and they're very sympathetic to communism and love to hear what you're saying about fighting the system. Comrades have been putting forth our program, connecting with people on the streets and showing an option that can actually overthrow the capitalist system in their lifetime. In the past, when we had a good conversation, explained the role of the party, oftentimes we'd ask people, "Okay, do you want to sign up and write their name on the sheet?" We changed this approach, and matching up with the seriousness of our content, we also matched up with the seriousness of our ask, asking them if they can join right on the spot, if they can join the party, and if not, set up a meeting with them right away. And with that, you can send them an article, or if they buy the paper, you have a concrete plan to actually discuss with them. That gives them a lot of energy to actually build the party, to learn more about our ideas.
We've also just had a very successful public event here in this building. I know it's a church, but that's where we had a pretty successful public event. We had about 10 people that weren't members of the organization show up to the event, recruited 1 person on the spot, and sold over $154 of press materials here. We've actually recruited 8 people at UNT so far of the fall offensive, and I would say with these 8 people, they're very serious, they're dedicated, and yes, they're paying a day's wage in dues.
thirst for Marxist literature and a further examination of these ideas was felt this year. One important thing to note is the lack of identity politics in the conversations we were having at the tables. In previous fall offensives, there were these inundations with identity and who you represent. And in this year, those ideas were completely scattered by a more tangible economic concern. People wanted to know if they were going to be fed, housed, if they were going to have careers after college. And we were here to meet them and to let them know that under a socialist, centrally planned economy, those concerns can be met by the working class's efforts. We were able to convince 200 people to have a further discussion on these ideas. Those contacts have been reached out throughout the following weeks, and as of today, we've got 6 new members to the RCA here in Chicago.
We had many students walk up to the table and excitedly ask us, "Are you guys communists?" They saw the hammer and sickle. They saw us tabling out here, and they saw a politically organized and serious professional party organizing along class lines. And so many students saw that and immediately were writing their name on our sign-up sheet and asking us questions about how they can get involved. One student came up to our table and they bought not just the latest issue of the newspaper, they bought the prior 4 issues as well. They walked away with 5 copies of our paper and were telling us how excited they were to read it. And right then and there, we set up a meeting so that we could discuss them getting involved with the party as a full-fledged member. And even students who came up to our table with a general sense of skepticism or confusion or reluctance around the ideas of communism or Marxism, even they were asking questions with a genuine curiosity. Many of these students are incurring tens of thousands of dollars in student loan debt and questioning how valuable is this college education going to be in their economic future. They see the mounting unemployment rate. They see the increasing disparity between the rich and the poor, and were asking us what our proposed solutions are for dealing with these very real problems.
I'm actually honored to be one of the new recruits for the RCA, and I met them just a couple weeks ago, and I spoke to Comrade Christian here. I had never really considered myself a very political person until about the past year. What really pleased me when I saw the group out here standing and talking to people and tabling was about a year and a half ago. We had the encampment in the DePaul Quad, which was busted up, and a lot of students who were in solidarity of Gaza and the genocide against Palestine. They busted it up and they just tore everybody up and sent them all home in the middle of the night. And it was a little horrific. And I think attention needs to be brought and the platform needs to be made here on the campuses and in the schools, in the cities. And there's an untapped group of students who are willing to have their voices be heard and join the RCA, and I think be part of the future.
Here in Minneapolis on the University of Minnesota campus, we had tabling sessions 3 times a week at least. I'm here in front of Kaufman Memorial Union. This is the hub of where the students congregate, and we would often set up tabling sessions in front of the lawn here. I'm kind of over here in the main walkways. Wherever there was foot traffic, that's where the communists were. We also made an effort to poster all over campus and in the surrounding residential area leading up to the public event, which helped us to build ourselves up as the communists on campus. Some students would recognize us from the posters and were enthusiastic to finally connect with us. About halfway through the fall offensive campaign, the university Teamsters went on strike, and I'm standing right in the middle of where there was a ginormous rally for these Teamsters. The strike piqued the interest of many students, and even though the strike didn't last long itself, we were able to fold these events into one another, asking students about the strike and asking the workers about support from the students. This was an opportunity to start political conversations left and right. We did get quite a few contacts over the course of the few weeks. We got at least over 100, and at the present moment, we were able to turn 5 of them into recruits and 1 sustainer. We've also made over $460 in sales, and this was kind of capstoned by our public event, Why You Should Be a Communist. There were at least 10 contacts in total at the event. They all stuck around. We were singing songs afterward, revolutionary songs. We asked 2 to join on the spot, and they did. We asked comrades who came up to the table, why did you walk over? And many of them pointed to our banner that a comrade made: abolish the billionaires, abolish wage slavery, free tuition, free healthcare, free Palestine. One of the new recruits we made here on campus is a comrade who moved from Louisiana. They've been following along with the Against the Stream podcast for a while, and they knew that we had a significant presence in Minneapolis. And when they saw us at a table, they walked up and they said, "Finally, I found you," when they saw us, and proceeded to join on the spot. They brought in another friend of theirs as well.
I had picked up the State and Revolution and the Spectre of Communism podcast at around the same time. Having those two perspectives to kind of build off of and compare to, I think very much helped. And by the time I had finished the book, I was pretty confident that I wanted to join the party and that they had the right ideas.
What was it like listening to it in a world of, confusion, and what kind of drew you to its ideas and its message?
It felt very much like having somebody who knew what they were saying, knew what they were talking about, and was imparting this knowledge that they had collected. And they really gave some analysis of things that I had not previously known about. They talked about things like the Russian Revolution. One that really stuck with me was like the art and culture and the Russian Revolution, something I had not previously considered. And then this very educated, knowledgeable person tell me, this is what happened, this is where things were going, this is why we care, and this is our perspective. It had very cohesive ideas.
What was it like meeting our comrades at the tabling session? What did you feel the first time you saw that hammer and sickle on our paper?
I was working to try to actively find the party because I wanted to join. And so whenever I first saw one of our tabling sessions, I was riding my bike and I rode past them, turned around, parked it, and was like, I need to get y'all's contact information. And everyone was very welcoming. I got the number of one of the members and I talked to them about when the meetings were. I came in, there was a very approachable atmosphere, there was space to talk. Overall, I found it very easy to kind of like voice ideas and try to hammer out my perspective and how that kind of, what the party's perspective was on these things.
I think this shows us the desire for Marxist ideas and for people to change their conditions by joining a revolutionary party.
My name's Ethan. I'm a member of the Revolutionary Communists of America here in Philadelphia, and right now I'm out here on Temple University's campus, where for the past 3 weeks we've been talking to students about the need for revolutionary communism. And really the response that we've gotten has been ecstatic so far. Students are completely fed up, completely angry with climate change, with war and genocide and imperialism, with austerity cuts, the cuts to our public transportation system all around us. I could keep going on, but it's been to the point where at our very first tabling, before we were even set up, someone, a student on campus, leapt up to us and was like, "Are you guys the Temple Communists? I've been looking for you guys." And this is the kind of mood we've been met with to try and connect with this radical mood, especially amongst the youth. And for the first 2 weeks, we tabled very intensely on campus, 2 or 3 times every single day. We have talked with an untold hundreds, maybe even thousands of students here on campus. We've made over 180 signups, sold over 160 papers, and already recruited 5 new communists here at Temple into our ranks, with many more on the way. We had multiple discussions on the most recent issue of The Communist, issue number 16. It has the questions students are having, like on reformism and Zoran Mamdani, or what would a communist America look like? What kind of party are we recruiting students to? Are we recruiting them to, a book club, a reading group, or maybe just, some kind of student organization like all the others? Or are we recruiting them to a serious professional revolutionary party that treats them like adults? Our first public meeting that we had just this past week, which was called Why You Should Be a Revolutionary Communist. And I think this was a big success. 15 really high quality contacts came out to it, all of which were enthralled in the political discussion, and 2 of which joined right on the spot after the meeting. And I think the morale was very high in the room. And this is only the beginning. We have a second public meeting planned in a couple weeks from now on reform versus revolution. We have the New York Marxist School. We're trying to bring as many students here on campus out to as possible in November. How do we need to advertise this? We need to take these posters and we need to go out to our periphery. All these signups and contacts that we've made, all the new comrades that we've recruited, put these posters in their hands and say, "Hey, do you have any friends that are going to be interested in this meeting? Can you go into your classroom and ask your teacher if you could shout out this meeting that you're really excited for?" Really, one, gets the students to spread the word amongst the rest of the student body themselves. And then 2, this also serves another purpose of immediately wrapping up all of our new contacts and recruits into the practical activity of building the party. We've established a super definite presence here on campus. Whether they agree with us yet or not, every single student out here knows that the communists are here. Boldly, they know that if they want to go to any kind of radical leftist communist organization, it's going to be us.
Comrades, I want to take a quick moment out of the episode to remind you to like and subscribe. And if you have any questions, please send them down in the comment section. We're not content creators. We're not doing this to make ad money on YouTube. We're on this platform so that we can give Marxist ideas to the communist layer in society and recruit them to the revolutionary communists of America. So again, like, subscribe, and comment on the videos, and share this video with who you think might be interested in joining the revolutionary communists of America. If you haven't joined the party, go down into the description of this video and click the link communistusa.org/join.
Hey, the Seattle Communists are out here on a cold Sunday morning talking to students and workers as they commute about their day and explain to them what capitalism is and how it's not going to be able to solve their problems, why we need a genuine communist party in order to fight against the Republicans, against the Democrats, and actually represent the workers. And a lot of people are open to those ideas. We've gotten 4 sales, we've gotten a contact, and we've had some really good conversations with people. So we're really excited to continue our fall offensive and head back onto campus once the students get back.
Here in New York, the fall offensive has been great. We've been targeting campuses in 4 out of the 5 boroughs, and from what I can tell, it seems like everywhere we've targeted, there's been a general enthusiasm for communism, but more so, people have been very curious about communism and asking very fundamental questions that we are excited to answer. And this, of course, makes all the sense in the world. You know, in a world dominated by capitalism, only our enemies get to define these things. Most people don't learn about communism from Vladimir Lenin or Karl Marx or your friendly neighborhood communist. They learn about these ideas from Tucker Carlson or Jesse Waters or what have you, Fox News. So a lot of people have been coming up to us and asking us for, you know, the perspective on these issues from a communist. We've recruited over 20 new dues payers at an average of over $50 dues. I know that in Brooklyn we recruited 5 new members, one of whom is a college student, which is very, very good. In Queens, we recruited 3 new students and more members on top of that. In the Bronx, we now have a series of active contacts, and we have a series of active contacts, people who are likely to join soon in a high school, which is quite exciting. And then the big news from New York is that we now have our first actual foothold at NYU. We have a branch there, and we had a public meeting in which 16 contacts attended. It went very, very well. We had a lead off on why you should be a communist, and a lively discussion that followed on all types of questions, like what happened in the Soviet Union, what about China, all of these kinds of things. It was very, very good and engaging.
We're doing the fall offensive at a high school for the first time in New York City this year. And a couple of weeks ago, we set up our table with the RCA banner on the corner of the high school. And as the students passed by when they were let out of school, a lot of them stopped by our table to ask questions. There's a lot of curiosity around these ideas. What is communism? How is it different from socialism? What is capitalism? And at one point, there was a group of freshmen and sophomores who started to chant communism, and eventually there was a mosh pit formed around our table. But outside of all the enthusiasm, there are people who are looking to get involved. We've had serious conversations. One of the people followed us and asked us questions for a full hour, and even joined us at the social afterwards to ask us about imperialism and the role that U.S. imperialism has played. We have a high school comrade who's working really hard to build in his high school. He's been talking about these ideas with his friends, and one of his friends has actually already come to one of our branch meetings, and we recruited him as well. So this goes to show you that the youth is hungry for these ideas. They're looking to get involved, and as long as we're going out there and connecting with them, we have the potential to grow into a sizable force, hopefully relatively quickly.
Why am I a communist? A lot of different reasons. Like, the main reason would be related to like my experience and my family's experience with healthcare in the United States. I mean, healthcare for profit. I start to realize why people distrust medicine. It's because of the profit incentive. Anything that could make a positive difference or is supposed to help people was really corrupted by the profit motive. The first time that I met the comrades, I was on the quad. When I first passed them, I was like, I kind of want to say something, but I was like nervous, like, what do I say? They were like saying, are you tired of capitalism? I am, so that really caught my attention. And I went back past them, and then I went back and I was talking to them. I talked about a lot of anger that I had, a lot of grievances, a lot of things in the world that are like so depressing, things that I have been thinking about for a really long time. And they were talking about like solutions.
We're not done yet, right? The point is that the fall offensive has kind of opened the floodgates for interest, contacts, activity now we are really reaping what we've sown, and we're still actively recruiting and channeling all of this energy into actually building the party.
Today, the RCA is a small force on the political landscape, but history is on our side. This process won't be a straight line to victory, but our message will resonate more and more in the years ahead. It's a process that the ruling class is unable to stop. Right now, it's up to the cadres of the Revolutionary Communist International, armed with Marxist ideas, to carry that process to its revolutionary conclusion.
It's been a long week in politics. Donald Trump has proposed another peace plan for Gaza, a plan that Hamas has until today to answer. And meanwhile, the Gen Z revolution is continuing. We've seen over the past month revolutionary movements in Indonesia and Nepal, where heads of states and governments have been overthrown. And we've seen protest movements in places like the Philippines, Ecuador, Paraguay, Peru. And now we see the new flashpoints of this movement in Madagascar and Morocco, where mass revolutionary movements are raging as we speak. We'll be talking about all of this, but first we'll start with the main item of today, which is the Gaza-bound flotilla, which has been intercepted by the Israeli Navy last night. This led to immediate mass protests all across Europe, in places like Spain, Greece, Italy, Germany, and even in Britain. Now, what this reflects is the enormous support there is for the Palestinian cause all across the world amongst the working classes. But we have to ask ourselves the important question: how can it be that after all of this time, with this amount of effort being exerted by working people and young people all across the world, that the Palestinians are as far away from their freedom as ever before? That is a serious question that all people who are dedicated to this cause must answer. And we must make a serious study of the means and measures that are necessary to win. My name is Hamid Alizadeh. I'm here today with Jorge Martin, and this is Against the Stream. So, Jorge, it was pretty explosive situation last night.
Yes.
I mean, we knew that something would happen, but I have to say, I was surprised at the scale of things.
Yes, well, this was bound to happen. This flotilla, which has been sailing for the last few weeks with about, I think it's 46 different boats from different countries, from Spain, from Italy, from Greece, from Cyprus, some from Turkey, from Tunisia,
Malaysia,
and also people in these boats are also from other different countries. Like even there's two from Colombia, and they're from all over the world. And their stated aim was to break with the Israeli naval embargo of Gaza and to deliver aid and means of curing people and so on. And the Israeli army was never going to allow them to go through. There have been other flotillas before, and every time is the same. Once they reach or they come close to territorial waters, which are claimed by Israel, but in fact they are just outside of Gaza, so in reality they are Gazan territorial waters. They are intercepted by the Israeli Navy. And this is exactly what happened yesterday in a most brutal manner. Imagine this. I mean, this is the middle of the night. And the Israelis gave them a warning. They said, you need to turn around. And they said, no, you have no right. We are in international waters. They continued to go ahead. And then the Israeli army basically boarded these boats with guns and so on, arrested everyone. I think that as of this morning, there were maybe 3 boats that had not been seized, but the rest, over 40 boats, have been seized. 400, close to 500 people have been arrested. and among in a most violent manner, and taken to a Israeli harbor where they're being detained, and well, it's not very clear what's going to happen. They're probably going to be expelled, processed, and expelled. But yes, it's pretty brutal images that, and many people were watching back home because this was the flotilla was being tracked along its route. And yeah, it was pretty explosive, and so that's why there was an immediate reaction.
Yes, and also there were quite a few prominent people.
Yes, members of parliament. There was a member of parliament from Catalonia, members of parliament from Italy, member of the senator from Ireland, I think. There were also trade union leaders, prominent activists like Greta Thunberg, and others. So this made it more prominent, and particularly because there are a lot of people from Spain and Italy. In these two countries, the flotilla has become a focal point for all the accumulated rage and the solidarity movement and mass movement around this question.
I mean, the scenes that we saw yesterday, I thought they were quite inspiring, actually. I think a lot of people would have seen them and been quite inspired. First of all, this flotilla, you can have an opinion about the means and methods of struggle, but there were certainly brave and courageous people who stood up to this Israeli military machine.
Yes.
And what was their crime? Was to want to bring aid.
Yes.
Something that Israel has systematically refused to bring, and
used as a
weapon, using starvation as a weapon, using all sorts of things.
Yes.
And the protests also. I mean, the protests were explosive. I knew that. I mean, we all knew that something would probably happen.
Yes.
But the videos that I've seen on social media, from everywhere, from Berlin, all over Spain, and Greece.
But particularly in Italy.
In Italy.
In Italy was huge. Actually thousands of people came out in Rome, in Milan, in Turin, in Bologna, in Genova.
This was late night.
Everywhere, yes.
This was pretty late. This wasn't during the day.
It wasn't just a protest demonstration. In some cases they went to the Israeli consulates and embassies, but in Italy they actually followed with the slogan of the big strike movement and protest movement of the previous Monday the 20th of September, 22nd of September, when the slogan was, "Let's block everything." I think this is also related to the flotilla. The flotilla is also the idea that the governments of the world should be doing something. They're not doing anything. They are allowing this genocide to go on for 2 years now, by Israel, without saying anything, or maybe just words. And
right now I'm writing out the notes for the workout we're about to do. So I'll show you the notes.
When the slogan was, "Let's block everything." I think this is also related to the flotilla. The flotilla is also the idea that the governments of the world should be doing something. They're not doing anything. They are allowing this genocide to go on for 2 years now, by Israel, without saying anything, or maybe just words and so on. And there's something needs to be done. So they've taken direct action. And the idea in Italy, it's caught the imagination of millions of people, is that we need to do something concrete.
Yes.
And so last night, as it happened the previous Monday, they went down and they blockaded the train stations, not just the main ones, but all train stations, harbors, ports around Italy, in Genova, in Livorno, in Taranto, Ravenna, and so on. People said, okay, this is enough. The governments are not doing anything. We will take direct action.
It's interesting because this goes back to the yellow vests in a way. In France, in 2018, this movement against austerity and price hikes on petrol, I think it was.
Yes.
And which blocked and kind of occupied squares and roundabouts. And then this was taken up again by anti-austerity movement and anti-government movement in France last month, or in the past month. And now this has come up and been linked to the movement in Italy and the Gaza movement.
The slogan in France for this huge anti-austerity protest on the 2nd of September, on the 10th of September, on the 18th of September, and then now again today. 2nd of October. The slogan is, "Let's block everything." This is over austerity measures. In Italy, is over solidarity with Gaza, but the slogan is the same: let's block everything. And I think that this is very significant. In Italy, there's going to be big demonstrations today. There's students are occupying the faculty, the universities, and high schools. But tomorrow there's a general strike.
Tomorrow,
and this is unprecedented. On the 22nd, there was a call for a general strike by this smaller, more left-wing trade union, the USB, the rank and file trade union. It's called the Unione Sindacale de Base, and they call for a general strike. But this union doesn't have the actual power to carry out the general strike. There were strikes in many sectors, but it was mainly a day of mass demonstrations and direct action. People again went down to the train stations, they blockaded train stations, the harbors, and so on. But because this strike, this call for strike on the 22nd, put the CGIL, which is the main trade union historically linked to the Communist Party and so on, put the CGIL bureaucracy under so much pressure. Why are you not doing anything? Many of its members were asking questions or were coming out on strike or participating in the protests. So the CGIL also had to come out officially and say, yes, if they touch the flotilla, if the Israelis attack the flotilla, we will call a general strike, which was the demand of the other USB union. And so now they had no other alternative. They have called for a general strike in Italy tomorrow. Not just this smaller USB union, but the CGIL, which has 5 million members and has a majority of in the metal workers sector and transport and so on.
Heavy industries.
Italy tomorrow is going to be paralyzed. And think about this, it's going to be paralyzed by a general strike over a political issue. A political issue which is related to international solidarity against imperialism. This, I will say, this is unprecedented. There might be some precedents for this, but not in recent times. Is an extreme demonstration of this anger, accumulated anger over the question of Palestine, which has radicalized many people across the world. And in Italy, someone has given a channel to this through this call for a general strike. This has taken on and has provided a channel of expression.
I mean, this really reflects the role of the trade union leaders and the leaders of the so-called left. Because what we often hear is, from these people in particular, but I mean, this is a general notion that communists here on the left is, well, you know, people don't really want to fight.
Yeah.
People don't really care. People are not really willing to sacrifice. And people are not really, I mean, there's 1,000,001 variations of this argument. But in reality, you see who are the ones who don't want to fight. The fact that it has come to the point where the rank and file of the workers' movement is literally dragging their leaders on the threat of what? They're afraid that if they don't follow suit, this movement is going to take off, run out of their control, and they're going to lose their positions. This is what they care about, essentially, right?
Yes.
And but it also shows that for years they have been dragging their feet. In fact, they have been tacitly waiting, watching, as attack after attack has been imposed on the working class, right? And not only is it, you know, this is again, the working class is very selfish. They only care about themselves, as you say. This is a matter of international class solidarity. This is a pretty advanced concept when we talk about consciousness and working class consciousness. And yet this is precisely on this matter that the Italian working class is dragging its leaders behind it. And I mean, and the effect, we'll see, but it will be significant.
Yes.
Already we've seen, you told me about this, the blockade of several ports.
Yes. This is the thing, because the USB is strong, this union is strong amongst the dockers in a number of ports, particularly in Livorno and Genoa, but also some other ports. And they've been talking about this, discussing this question for several months. Dockers have taken action in Greece at the port of Piraeus, dockers have taken action in Marseille, and in some other ports around the world, particularly in Europe, to blockade shipments of weapons, ammunition, and fuel for the Israeli war machine. And in Italy, they had been discussing this question. So around this time of the general strike call on the 22nd, the dockers decided, yes, we're now gonna implement this. It's in our power to stop these shipments and these ships from coming in and out and being loaded and unloaded and transported in the harbors where we work.
Yeah.
And so they took strike action. They refused. They pledged themselves to not handle any cargo for the Israeli war machine. And in the last week, since the 22nd, they have stopped a massive shipment of fuel from the Italian oil refining company, for the Israeli war machine. They stopped another ship called the Zim Virginia. I think Zim is a container ship company from Israel. So they were loading some war material at the port of Livorno, and the dockers stopped it. Then they attempted to do the same thing at the port of Genoa. It was also stopped. And in this case, it's not just the dockers taking strike action, but also calling on the people from these towns to come and support them. Workers, students, in large numbers, hundreds of people. Yeah. In the port of Livorno, I think the port has been blocked for about 10 days. Thousands of people participating in this round-the-clock blockade to check on every single ship that goes in and out, whether this is related to the Israeli war machine or not. This is an example of the power of the working
As you
class.
said, this shows the enormous power of the working class, which in most times, in ordinary times, under capitalism, is only a potential.
Yes.
But here we see that actually nothing functions without the working class allowing it. Nothing works in this society without the permission of the working class. And therefore, the role, the task of a leadership is precise, of a leadership of the unions, of the working class organizations, is precisely to make this potential conscious.
Yes.
And by making it conscious, making it actual. The workers realizing how powerful they are.
Yes.
And what they have, but obviously this is what the bureaucracy fears more than anything.
Yes.
Because they're afraid that it's going to run out of control.
And in fact, at the weekend, there was a conference organized by the Genoa dockers, a conference of dockers from all over Europe, and I think there were some from Tunisia as well and Turkey. They had a conference to discuss this question, how to coordinate a workers' boycott of Israel, which is something that we've been saying for a long time. And I think that it's now becoming the conclusion of many, many people who are very angry over the genocide in Israel. That it's not just a question of marching from A to B. Mass demonstrations play obviously a big role, but now people want to take direct action. The governments, this is one of the things that the dockers were saying at this conference. The governments should be implementing an embargo of trade boycott of Israel. They're not doing it. We will do it. And this is a very powerful conclusion that they have drawn. And I think that this is the way forward for the movement, really.
I mean, in embryonic form, what's really posed in this very small situation is who has the power over society?
Exactly.
Is it the bosses and the capitalists and the bankers who sit in their offices and tell us what to do? Or is it people who actually carry it out, the working class?
Yes.
And I think also what we've seen is, compared with the previous waves of class struggle we've seen in the past period, you saw between 2008 and 12, you had the Occupy movement, the Arab revolutions. There's been a significant movement, as you say, towards direct action, where before you had a lot of, let's go to a square and say that we don't like this. And then I guess the idea was somehow someone will do something about it.
Through moral pressure.
Through moral pressure, and they will realize, kind of an asking in a way. Obviously, that was the
first step. Yeah.
That was the first step, but also that was the pressure, that was the base, the level that the leadership of the movement kept it to. But here you see that the pressure from below is moving increasingly in the direction of direct action, and this is a significant change in consciousness. And this is also where things start to change. We saw in Egypt, for example, the Arab Revolution. In Egypt, you had week after week of people going to Tahrir Square in 2011 and 12. But it was right at the end when the working class started to move. The Mahalla workers started to strike. And then the ruling class realized, okay, we need to do something. And Mubarak was overthrown in order to save the system. what does this mean? This means that the ruling class is terrified of the idea that the working class should begin to understand the power that it wields.
In fact, what's happening tomorrow in Italy is that there is this call for a general strike by the CGIL and the USV unions that represent millions of workers. And Salvini, who is the leader of the Lega, one of the ruling coalition parties, and who is also I think he's the deputy prime minister and the minister of transport, so this is the key question now. He said that he will not allow the unions to paralyze the country. So we'll see. I mean, the government said the country will not be paralyzed, but I'm pretty sure, just judging by the mood of last night and today and the 22nd, the accumulation of anger and the willingness to take direct action by hundreds of thousands of people, that tomorrow Italy will be paralyzed. And this will not be the end of the movement. Then on the 4th, which is the Saturday, there's already been a call for a national demonstration on Rome, which will be huge. And then there will be pressure for the whole movement to continue. In fact, if there's any perspective for this movement should go all the way until they bring down this government, right? Yeah. And the potential is there. Yeah. There's another interesting question that I think we should highlight, that Italy has a right-wing government, a very right-wing government. You know, Meloni, in her youth, she was a member of fascist youth organization. No, she's not a fascist. This is not a fascist government, but it is a right-wing, like Trump-aligned government in a major European country. And many people might think, okay, but yeah, that means that the Italians are right-wing. But it doesn't mean any such thing. You know, when this government was elected, it was elected because it was the only parties that were outside the previous coalition, which was carrying out austerity measures. Yeah. So it was a rejection of the previous coalition, a massive degree of abstention. I think Fred was talking about this the other week. Yeah. And then many people drew negative, pessimistic conclusions. Oh, the right wing is in power in Italy. And, yeah, the right wing is in power in Italy, and the masses don't want it. And now this is the real.
Because they've been carried out austerity. Exactly. They've been highlighted as this great example of the European economy. Yes. They've stabilized. Mm-hmm. I mean, Italy still has 140 or 50, huge amount of debt. Yes. But the deficit, the yearly added deficit, is brought down to 3%. Mm-hmm. By what? Through cuts and attacks and austerity. And this is the result. Mm-hmm. Now, this movement, obviously, is not just about Gaza. It's an important element, but it's about all of the pent-up anger over the years that's now finding an expression. And I think, just to round up this segment, I think that the conclusions are also clear for the Palestine movement, and for the people fighting in the unions, who are involved in all sorts of struggles on a daily basis, that these are all the same struggle, essentially. And we'll discuss it in a minute, the Gaza peace plan and all. What are the forces on one side and what are the forces on the other side? The same people who are aiding Israel and who are the same people who are carrying out austerity. Exactly. The movement is a result of the same system, of the capitalist system. And the movements should be united. This is a lesson for anyone who is involved in the Palestine movement, anywhere in the world. The solution to the next step is link up with the working class, as wide and as radical protesters as possible. Link the demands of end of the war in Gaza to the demands of austerity, to the demands of wages, to the demand of living standards that everyone in society feels, and direct action. Mm-hmm. Prepare and campaign
workers boycott.
For workers boycott, for the working class to involve itself in an organized fashion through the unions, through their other bodies in this struggle.
And I think that this conclusion is already being drawn by many people. I saw there was a general strike in Greece yesterday over some anti-labor laws that the government wants to pass, including allowing for a 13-hour working day. I mean, this is going back to the times of Engels, you know. But anyway, in this general strike, many people were carrying Palestine flags. Yeah. In the movement in France, which is over austerity measures, many people are carrying Palestine flags. So the two things are completely linked in the minds of many people. Before we move to the next segment, just to mention in one sentence that the Spanish state across Spain, it's also another one to watch, because this has had a big impact, radicalizing impact. Today there's a nationwide a student strike. There is also an education strike tomorrow, and pressure is building in the same direction as in Italy. And I've already seen images, thousands of students, university and high school students in Madrid, in Bilbao, in Barcelona, across the country. The strike is solid, the student strike is solid, but there's also huge demonstrations already. And there will be more demonstrations tonight. So these are two countries where the movement is perhaps more advanced.
We're talking about mass movement and student strike in Spain, general strike, mass movement and strikes, blockades, yes. And general strike in Italy is going to be the next 3 or 4 days. General strike in France, general strike in Greece, all in the same week.
Yes. What a week.
What a week. What a week.
Yes.
We don't even have time to deal with half of this.
Yes.
Let's move on. We will definitely return to all of these and keep an eye on it. But before yesterday, the big news item of the week was Donald Trump's peace plan for Gaza.
Yes.
It's a pretty simple peace plan. Normally these things are very complicated with lots of caveats and points, but this is, I feel like it's Donald Trump who's written it almost.
20 points.
20 points. And what it basically is, first of all, it's been declared. It's not been negotiated with Hamas. It's been worked out by the Americans with the leaders of the Muslim world, so-called Muslim world, the Muslim majority countries, and then Netanyahu, who
has been flown to the US.
To the US and changed a whole lot of it. And then it was just declared in a press conference, and Donald Trump said, Hamas has 3 days to accept this. Otherwise, I mean, I don't know what otherwise would happen, because so far Israel has been doing whatever they wanted to. But the plan basically consists of this. Within 72 hours of accepting the plan, Hamas has to release all of the hostages that they took on October 7th, which is, I believe, 48, if I'm not mistaken.
Of which I think
20 I believe to be dead.
Oh, sorry, or the other way around.
Yeah. Then, in return, and at the same time, disarm. Once that's done, Israel, in that period, Israel would withdraw from a very small part of Gaza. Once all of that is done, Israel would release 250 lifetime prisoners out of 300 that they hold, which are mainly Hamas operatives and so on. 1,700 other prisoners that have been
arrested in the last 2 years.
In the last couple of years. And then, on the basis of an international peacekeeping force being organized by Muslim majority countries, I think the countries that have been mentioned is Indonesia, Jordan, Egypt. They would move in to patrol Gaza, essentially, and while Hamas disarms entirely, and then at a certain point, Israel will withdraw, although they will keep a buffer. Someone said that buffer zone is actually about 25% of the Gaza Strip. I don't know if that's true or not.
And then there will be an authority made up of an international Muslim-based military force, then a technocratic. I hesitate to call it a government.
It's a company.
Technocratic company.
It's a corporation.
A technocratic committee of Palestinian people who are not linked to any parties. And then on top of this, a company, as you said, a company which is going to be run by Tony Blair and Donald Trump himself.
Yeah.
On top of this, taking all the executive.
And then at a certain point, the Palestinian Authority is reformed. I don't know what that means, but the Palestinian Authority is hated. Because it's basically the prison wardens of the Palestinians. Then they will take it over. And
so the first thing that we need to say is that this is not really a peace plan. This is a plan for the surrender of the Palestinians and the continued subjugation of the Palestinians. The Palestinians have no agency in this. They have no right to have their own homeland, or their own decisions, or their own democracy, nothing. They're going to be ruled by an international committee, foreign troops, and so on.
This is
still,
imposed
and
by,
still,
this is supported by the international community.
exactly. And still, Israel will keep troops inside Gaza, ready to enter at any time when the Palestinians have already disarmed and they can't resist in any way.
This is
There's no mention of the West Bank either.
No, and the Palestinian people are the biggest losers of this.
Exactly.
I think that's absolutely clear.
Yes.
And the idea of a Palestinian homeland, and that is further away than ever before. If this plan was to be implemented, which is the question that arises. Now let's go through it step by step, because we have to look at all the different players here, what their interests are. Now, first of all, it's clear that this, as brutal and oppressive as this is, it still remains that Benjamin Netanyahu's main war aims have not really been met. It's not clear really what happens to Hamas. First of all, we have to say that, we'll get back to that, but the original draft said that Hamas would give up its offensive arms. But this draft, which was changed by Netanyahu in a meeting with Trump immediately before the press conference, states that it's all weapons that Hamas. But Hamas gets to stay in Gaza. It's not really disbanding itself. It's got popular support. I think it is quite clear still in Gaza. So Hamas is not really gone, and the idea of Hamas giving up its weapon can't really be checked and verified either. Hamas is still there. The hostages have not been recovered, and the newly declared aim of annexation of Gaza and Gaza City has not been met at all either. Meanwhile, there's mass dissatisfaction in Israel. We saw mass protests throughout the summer. In fact, a large degree of solidarity even with Palestinians who were being slaughtered openly in the most brutal fashion, obviously. And so Israel's war aims have not really been met, and this is a big problem for Netanyahu. He also stands to lose power. We'll get to that. But why does Donald Trump want this? That's the main question. I think
Donald Trump doesn't want peace, by the way. He wants stability or stabilization. He doesn't want this really disruptive situation from his point of view.
Exactly. He's made it clear from the beginning. The Middle East and the wars is a distraction from America's real problems, which is China. It's the main one. He doesn't want to be dragged into these wars. Now he has been dragged into one war, and he's probably going to be dragged into quite a few other wars. Well, there's another question. He probably does want the Nobel Peace Prize. I think he is a narcissist. I mean, that's obviously true. But Israel's conduct has undermined U.S. imperialism and the interests of U.S. imperialism. Now, about a month ago, we saw the complete insane attack of Israel on Gaza, where they bombed.
On Doha, you mean? Yeah.
On Doha, on Qatar, where they bombed the building where Hamas negotiators were supposed to meet and discuss the negotiations that were taking place with the U.S. So here you have America negotiating with Hamas, and Israel just brazenly bombing them, where in a country that hosts the biggest U.S. military base in the region.
Yes.
This was a huge provocation. This was a provocation, obviously, against Hamas. This shows that Netanyahu is not interested in any form of peace. He's not interested in that. No. But it's also a slap in the face of America, of Trump. It's basically spitting him in the face, saying, "You need me more than I need you," which is partially true. But what does it mean for the U.S.? Qatar was supposed to be safe by hosting a U.S. military base.
Exactly.
Is supposed to get at least U.S. military protection.
Air defense.
Air defense. It didn't get any such thing. And this has been the case throughout the past 2 years, that Israel has broken any agreement with anyone that existed in the Middle East, which has led to what? The biggest, I think, reflection of this has been a defense deal between Saudi Arabia and Pakistan, which is a huge thing. Now, Pakistan used to be an American proxy today is a Chinese proxy. They've made a defense pact, which means that Pakistan will come to the defense of Saudi Arabia by any means necessary, which also includes nuclear bombs, by the way. Pakistan is a nuclear state. And which means what? Which means that they don't see America. They can't depend on America.
Yes. And there was also a meeting, wasn't there a meeting of the Arab League in which they talked about the creation of an Arab NATO military pact amongst themselves? I don't think that this is going to go all the way, but what it reflects is that some of these countries are now thinking, quite rightly, that look, being an ally of the United States doesn't protect us. Maybe we should find other allies, and this is not in the interest of the United States, of course.
We have seen this process again and again in the past few years. The aggressive actions of U.S. imperialism and its allies in attempting to maintain the position of the super domination of every part of the world is pushing more countries into the arms of China, which has now become a pole of attraction on a world scale. And obviously, this was a big deal, and there's now reports that Donald Trump actually panicked after this event, and he forced Netanyahu to sign this deal, which he clearly did not want to sign.
But we know Netanyahu. No, I'm just saying, the minute after he signs a deal, then he goes back to Israel, or he goes on a press conference, and then he gives a slightly different version of the deal he's just signed, and then he starts blaming Hamas for breaking a deal that he's broken himself first, and he can get out of any amount of pressure from Trump, I think.
Yes, because Trump needs him. Yes. You know, there's an old saying sometimes it's better have someone in the tent pissing out than outside of the tent pissing in. And Netanyahu, for better or for worse, is on Trump's wing of the internal struggle within U.S. imperialism.
Yes.
He's a Trump ally, and Netanyahu's opponent, Gantz, is a liberal and an old school liberal and a neocon and so on. Well, these guys are also neocons, but he's a liberal, which means that Trump can't really afford to lose Netanyahu, and Netanyahu knows this. And America as a whole, the American ruling class, cannot afford to lose Israel as an ally. And as they get more and more isolated, and as their influence wanes in the Middle East as a whole, they're more and more dependent on Israel as the foremost outpost of imperialist domination.
In effect, what Trump is trying to do is impossible to achieve in the long term, which is, he in his previous administration, he brokered the Abraham Accords, which the basic idea was, let's have normalization between the Arab countries and Israel, and on this basis, then we promote trade and economic development and so on. But in reality, there cannot be any normalization between the Arab countries and Israel as long as the question of Palestine remains like a wound, an open wound in the region. Why? Not because the Arab countries or the leaders of the Arab countries care about the fate of the Palestinians. No, because what they care is the radicalizing effect that the Palestinian struggle and the genocide of Gaza is having in their own populations. In places like Jordan, Egypt, but also Saudi Arabia, also Turkey, where people are saying, "What are you doing? Right? We're supposed to be all part of the same Muslim brotherhood, the Ummah, but nevertheless, you are allowing our brothers and sisters in Gaza to be slaughtered." A slaughter that's being live broadcast throughout the world for 2 years running, and you're not doing anything. And this is creating revolutionary conditions in these countries, potential uprisings, and that's the last thing that the king of Saudi Arabia wants.
Precisely. Now, what does Benjamin Netanyahu want? First of all,
he wants to stay in power.
He wants to stay in power. He likes that, and he wants to stay out of prison.
Yes.
And we know as soon as this government falls. And as soon as the wars ends, he's bound to go to prison.
Yes.
Apparently, there's now talk about giving him amnesty, giving him way out. But he's also a narcissist, and he will not accept that. He will not accept that. He will go, and he did as soon as this. He stood there next to Trump in the press conference and kind of looked a bit subdued and said, "Yes, I will." But then, as soon as he went back, he said, "Oh, we will never accept anything like this. We will never." And he started walking back on all of these things. And his coalition partners said that they will leave the government.
Yes. Netanyahu has his own very powerful interests which play a major role in this whole situation. But we also need to understand that the Zionist ruling class for the last 80 years has always acted in the same way. Perhaps not in a crazy way like Netanyahu, but anytime there's been a conflict, they've taken more land. Their ambitions is for a greater Israel that is secure in its borders, and the only way they can secure Israel in its borders, from their point of view, is by smashing the Palestinians, removing them from all the lands where they still are. And this includes not only Gaza, but also the West Bank. While everyone's looking at Gaza, for the last 2 years they've been attacking the West Bank, entering the Palestinian refugee camps, killing people, arresting people, and encroaching even more in the West Bank, which is really not a Palestinian territory at all. It's crisscrossed by checkpoints and roads and so on. And the latest one is that they've said openly, or they're talking very, very aggressively about annexing the West Bank. Yeah. So I'm also thinking whether this Trump peace plan, which talks only about Gaza, means that perhaps Trump has hinted at giving the Israelis free hand to annex the West Bank formally.
Yeah, I mean the Israeli ruling class needs the one thing is they want to annex and they want to expand. That's built into their DNA. But also built into the DNA is the conflict with the Palestinians.
Yes.
Because that is how they justify themselves as a defender of the Jews. It's clear, for decades, it's public knowledge that Israel had a great hand in bringing Hamas to power, supporting Hamas as opposed to the left-wing factions of the Palestinian movement. In order to what? In order to say, we can't negotiate with these people. And so they need this thing. And they've all been, this is not just Netanyahu's project, they've all been a part of this.
Yes.
Furthermore, to let Arab armies back into the West Bank and Gaza this is never going to happen. And it's all based on what? On the goodwill of Israel. Once Hamas has given up his arms and his hostages, that is the only leverage that it has.
All negotiating cards.
Then we should trust Israel will do the right thing and pull out and then give it a...
Not completely.
Stage pull out and then give a...
Yes.
I mean, because obviously it's such a dependable and trustworthy regime, isn't it?
As history proves.
It's complete nonsense. Now, I don't think this... I think already they are trying to put the blame on each other, on the Hamas, and say that this is not going to... I cannot see, even in this extremely watered down version, how the Israelis can accept this plan. But then there's Hamas. They get the release of 250 lifetime prisoners. 1,700 ordinary people have been taken prison hostage by Israel in the past 2 years. But it has to give up all of its arms. It has to give us all of his hostages, as we just said, all of his leavers. And what will it... as an organization, never mind what it would give to the Palestinian people. Obviously, it would leave them defenseless. But why would Hamas accept this? It's clear that they have been saying, well, we need to... We can give up all offensive arms, which was originally in the plan. But here's the interesting thing. The original plan drafted between the Americans and the Arab Muslim leaders was stated there was a clearer timeline for withdrawal of the Israelis. There was a specific mentioning of Hamas giving up its offensive capabilities, but not its defensive capabilities. All of that was wiped away by Netanyahu and then, as we said, publicized to the world. But they still went ahead with it. There's now so many articles in the Middle Eastern press and the Pakistani press and so on. People say, oh, this is not the agreement that we signed up to, and very angry voices. But they're still going along with it.
Yes, exactly.
Because obviously, they don't care, as you said, they don't care about the Palestinians. They just want to end this because it's destabilizing them back home.
Yes.
And if they can get a deal where they get a say in Gaza, they can normalize things with the Israelis, they can get trade going, they can make money. Who cares about the Palestinians? They've sold them out, essentially. And now, this is what we see. a united international community against the people of Gaza.
And this includes, by the way, all those people who, what was it, last week or 10 days ago at the UN General Assembly, they were saying, oh, we recognize the Palestinian state. Which Palestinian state? Where is it? I mean, what does it mean? And all these people have now come out and say, including the Spanish president, Pedro Sanchez, who's the most vocal person who said, oh, this is a genocide. He now said, oh, I welcome the Trump Gaza peace plan because this is the way forward.
And the Muslim leaders, by the way, just to add, they will end up as the prison wardens of the Palestinians.
Exactly. Yes.
Because what's going to happen in Gaza at the first protest, food protest, or whatever thing there is, or if the Israeli attacks again, which side are these people going to be on?
Yes.
But in doing so, they're also playing with fire because then they're internalizing the Palestinian struggle into their own country, which is what they want to avoid at any cost. And I'm sure the Americans have really squeezed them to bring them on board with this.
And probably, I will say, probably Trump has also gotten commitment, or was extracted by force a commitment from these countries that they will pay for any economic reconstruction in Gaza.
Which
because the last thing
Trump
wants to do is spend any money in this.
Now the question is, what about the Palestinians? What's going to happen to the Palestinian struggle? As we said before, there's all of this effort, the heroic defense against the Israelis that the Palestinians have waged in the past 2 years, and for decades, really. The heroic movements of the masses all over the world in support of them. There's a vast majority of the world's population is clearly in support of the Palestinian cause. Millions and millions of people have taken to the streets and protested in one way or another. There's been a flurry of diplomacy and negotiations. Talks. What has achieved anything? I think that's an important question to ask because this idea of let's just go to another protest. Of course, it's important to go to protests. It's important to go to marches. But is that enough? And I think it's clear that it's not. Now, one thing that has come out is a very small thing, but it's significant because even that the bourgeois gave with gritted teeth is the recognition of Palestine as a state. We know it doesn't count for anything. It doesn't mean
But they were forced to make this gesture by the pressure of public opinion.
By the pressure and protest, mass protest. Yes. And you see, the bourgeois have a bird's eye view of society. They can see what's going on through their intelligence agencies and all other means and methods they have. A lot more than we know. The anger that's rife in society. And so what we see in Italy exploding to the surface, and in Greece and Spain and so on, they've been seeing that coming for a while. That's what they're afraid of. They're afraid of the class struggle, which is why they're moving in the direction that they have. So the only thing that actually works, the only times the Palestinians have actually gained anything, I would say the first time was the first Intifada, which led to the Oslo Accords, which is a betrayal of a revolution. But nevertheless, it gave a semblance of a state. And now we have this, again, on the basis of mass protests of the working class and the youth all over the world, which gave a little tiny result. And I think there's a commonality there. It's the revolutionary movement. It's the direct action. It's working class movements.
This is really the only way forward. In the West, in the Western imperialist countries, mass action, not just protest, but mass direct action and workers boycott, the working class taking the lead of this movement in order to actually hit the Israeli war machine. As the Italian dockers are saying, if the governments won't do it, they should. The governments won't do it, we will do it. A direct action by the working class. And in the Middle East, the same thing. The masses of the Middle East are seething with discontent over socio-economic questions, but also over the fate of the Palestinians. And if they were to overthrow these regimes in Jordan, Saudi Arabia, in Egypt, then you will have a completely different balance of forces in the region. A revolutionary Jordan, a revolutionary Egypt will change the whole balance in relation to the struggle of the Palestinians as well, and will also lead, in my opinion, this will happen sooner or later, to divisions within Israel, which already we can see in outline divisions within Israel between the ruling class and an increasing number of people who can see that unless the question of the Palestinian struggle is resolved in a democratic way, that there will not be peace for the Jewish population of Israel.
Yes, we see it's very clear. You have the Western imperialism as the main backer, without which Israel could never survive.
Exactly.
Which is the same as the Western ruling class. We've explained this many times. You have the Arab leaders who are also connected to the West. You do have another faction of the Middle Eastern capitalist class, which is Iran and Hezbollah and so on. But the point is, even they have shortcomings. They do fight against imperialism, but it's the bourgeois anti-imperialism they have, and their anti-imperialism has a limit to it, because what is it that the Iranian regime wants?
A deal.
A deal. That's what they want. It's not about defending Gaza. We have to say they're the only ones who've done anything. So from that point of view, they've done more than any other. But bourgeois anti-imperialism has a limit, and the limit is the immediate interest of the capitalist class. In fact, the way that they have governed Iran has meant mass dissatisfaction with them, because the same corruption that exists everywhere also exists inside Iran. In Iraq, where they have had huge influence, what's it led to? It's actually led to mass rejection of Iran and a confused relationship to Palestine. In Iraq, there's not a clear-cut, widespread support because the Iranian regime is kind of trying to present it as their cause, their
monopolized.
So actually, they've divided the working class, the Iraqi. In Lebanon is the same thing. There's obviously Hezbollah is seen as the most. They have been defending Lebanon more than any other force. All the other forces capitulated to Western imperialism. So they have a high star from that point of view. But nevertheless, after years of de facto being in power and sharing in government, there was a movement. There was a revolutionary movement against them in 2018. And today there is a lukewarm. There is a distrustful attitude, even though a lot of people still support them. But people don't forget these things. So, and there's a limit to how far these people will go. There's a limit to what they will appeal to, and that obviously puts a limit to what they will actually do for Gaza. They've been trying to say, no, let's sit down and let's organize it through international committees where we can have a part, where we can be members, where we can be equals to the West as a major power in the region. And obviously, that's not going to solve the situation for the Palestinians. But then you have the working class. Let's say in Jordan, they've been calling for the regime to intervene militarily.
Yes.
In movement after movement, millions of them. Well, that shows that does show what can be done.
Yes.
But the king is not going to do it. The royal family is not going to do it. The workers must take power themselves. And again, it comes down
the king has actually been part. I mean, the regime in Jordan has been actually part of defending Israel.
Yes, when Iran has been lobbing missiles, they've been shooting them down. Yeah. Now there was the Colombian president Petro. He's been out with some comments.
Yes, he was at the United Nations General Assembly, and he said, "Well, look, I mean, this is no longer a question of resolutions and declarations. We need to organize." This is what he said. "We need to organize an international army of volunteers to go and defend the Palestinians." I'd say that's completely correct. I have a doubt about whether he's actually going to do it, or he has the capacity or the willingness to actually carry out his words into action. But his words are completely correct. He's saying basically, what is the international community doing? Nothing. It's just passing resolution after resolution after resolution, and nothing actually happens. Something must be done, which is practical. And he has even said, we're going to raise an army in Colombia and so on. We'll see what happens. But he's been at least the most advanced, the most radical of all the governments in the world in relation to this question of Israel. Yesterday, he'd already cut off diplomatic relations with Israel, but yesterday he finally decreed the expulsion of the remaining diplomatic personnel by Israel. He suspended the free trade agreement they have with Israel. I think there are specific reasons for this, because Israel played a big role in supporting and arming and training the right-wing governments and the paramilitary militias in Colombia for a long time. And obviously, the people of Colombia don't forget about this. So this is a point that comes very close to home. But yes, what he's saying is correct. Something must be done that is practical, not just talk and resolutions.
Yes. The point is obviously who should
Yes.
direct that army,
Yes.
and the only people who have an interest and is the working class.
Yes.
So that puts the question of power, state power, and which class wields that power on the table. Obviously, Petro is not going to give the answer for that. I mean, he's saying it for whatever his own reasons. But it does show that there is no shortcut. The idea that it's utopian. It's utopian to talk about revolution and revolutionary change. This is something that's often brought up against communism. What is actually a utopia is that the methods that are used now, negotiations, diplomacy, petitions, moral pressure, individual boycotts, that's going to actually change anything on the ground. It's not. It's not going to change anything. Why would the Israeli ruling class, powerful ruling class with a powerful military force, one of the most powerful in the world, give up on any of that? And why would U.S. imperialism or Western imperialism do that? They're benefiting off of this, obviously. Okay, I think we should move on because there's been big events happening. I mean, it's such a whirlwind of events. You have every day there's like a new country erupting in general strikes, mass movements, mass protests, and now it's Madagascar and Morocco. Where should we start? Should we start with
maybe Madagascar?
Yeah.
Madagascar started a little bit earlier than Morocco, I think. This is part of this so-called Gen Z revolution. That's been happening in Indonesia, in Nepal, in East Timor, in the Philippines, but it's now crossed the Pacific, I guess. It's crossed the Pacific. There's now big movements in Peru, in Ecuador. The movement in Ecuador is slightly different, and then in Paraguay there was a demonstration at the weekend. And the common theme of all these movements is the youth have had enough, and organizing through social media, influencers, sometimes musicians and young people, through social media, organizing protests against corruption, against the disparity of wealth, and so on. So what happened in Madagascar was that on the 25th of September, so that's last Thursday, there was a call for a protest. And the protest was over water and electricity cutoffs, which sometimes run into 12 hours a day. So this is an unbearable situation. Madagascar is an extremely unequal society where 79% of the population live under the poverty line, is dominated by imperialism, by French imperialism, by US imperialism, and now also the Chinese are investing in Madagascar. And while the population live in extreme poverty, there is a small layer of people at the top who are extremely wealthy, who flaunt their wealth, who are involved in all sorts of corruption scandals. And so there was this beginning of a protest. The protest took place in Antananarivo, the capital, and also in a number of other cities across the country. And immediately was met with brutal police repression. Then there was looting and setting of buildings on fire and clashes with the police. And on the first day, I think it was 5-6 people died. According to an official account, I think it's probably more than that. And this, again, like in all these other countries, brutal repression instead of stopping the movement in its tracks, it just made people angrier, particularly the youth. And then the movement went on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and then on Tuesday they called for a day of national mobilization. And this was now a united call by all the student organizations from the main university campuses together with the Gen Z Madagascar movement. And Tuesday was like a tour de force between the government, the authorities, and the people. The demonstrators had said that they will march onto the center of the capital, Antananarivo, and the police and the gendarmerie, as it's called, they said, you're not going to march here. And there were columns of people, even some coming from 30 kilometers away, marching on foot to the capital, to the center of the capital. The police tried to block them. They couldn't. I've seen the images, just people just passing through the police lines with their hands raised. The police afraid to use brutal repression because it not worked the previous time. And then all these columns converging, the police tried to divert them to some stadium outside of the city center, but they wanted to go to the city center. And finally, they managed to cross the police lines, and there was a huge columns coming from all parts, mainly of youth. But now, by Tuesday, this was already a movement which involved local population, peasants, the poor people, and it was a huge demonstration in the capital, but also at the same time, huge demonstrations everywhere else. And finally, they managed to reach the May 13th square, which is where independence was proclaimed in the 1960s. It was highly symbolic. Here again, there was police repression, but the masses had already won the day. And now, this was on Tuesday. On Monday evening, the president had already dismissed the government as a concession to the movement, which didn't work either. The movement now adopted more demands. One, the dismissal of the president, the arrest and seizure of properties of this guy called, I have to read it because I can't remember, Ravatomanga, is the main businessman, one of the main businessmen in Madagascar, who's very close to the president, Rajoelina, and he's involved in all sorts of corruption scandals. He has his fingers in all pies of the economy. So they said that this guy needs to be arrested, put on trial, and his property seized, which is very important. The trade unions started to join in, the union of the electricity and water company workers declared a strike. The health workers threatened to go out on strike. The public civil servants, they're also going out on strike. So the working class starting to join the movement. And at this point, the movement is no longer interested in negotiations with this president. They want him out. And not only this, they also said that they should disband the Senate, the High Constitutional Court, and the National Electoral Commission. Basically, the movement has now adopted a demand that all power should be dissolved and power should be returned to the people. And they're calling it a national uprising, an uprising for the nation. And I think that this is completely correct. There are still many confused ideas in the movement, but the movement is advancing, is felt its own strength, and is going forward, and this is very important. The only thing I will say is that you're saying that all power should be dissolved. What are you going to put in its place? Yes. There's still a lot of confusion about that. What we will say as communists is that the masses should take power. They should form committees, democratic committees, in every neighborhood, in every city, in every village, and they should elect delegates to a national congress of revolutionary delegates and take power. Take power, not only political power, but also economic power. Expropriate the imperialists, repudiate the foreign debt, and expropriate the main means of production in the island, and take power into their own hands. That's the next step. It's difficult to see that they will go in this direction because there isn't a conscious revolutionary leadership in this movement. But certainly, I will say they're very close to overthrowing the whole regime. And then the question will be open. What comes?
What comes after?
What comes
yes,
next?
They're learning through practice.
Yes, exactly.
Because obviously that's the point, that most of ordinary people don't learn through books. They don't read history and theory and philosophy and so on, as most communists do. But they learn through action. Trotsky said that the most important aspect of a revolution is the entrance of the masses onto the stage of politics. When people say, in normal times they say, oh, okay, who am I to say anything? I don't know. There are people who are much better than politicians,
lawyers,
experts.
journalists.
They're a lot more clever than I am. That's what ordinary working class people say. But in a revolutionary situation, that's when ordinary people rise up and say, no, I I can't stand this anymore. I want to have a say. And people interfere, and there's this entrance, the direct action of the masses has a profoundly educational effect. And it galvanizes things. You know, you have very quickly, you go from general kind of protest to actually calling for the whole regime to fall.
Yes.
If you asked most Madagascans last week,
Exactly.
they would never have been able to predict that this is, and this is the problem with the left, if you have to have a go at them again, is that they always look at the still picture
as it is,
and they don't understand the development that once takes place, because once the masses go into action, then they begin to sense and they begin to feel, first of all, their own power, their own potential, but also they begin to understand the beast that they're dealing with. If they have illusions in the police, the first baton charge will dispel that that illusion. You know, and now they're focusing on one businessman. He may or may not be arrested, something may or may not happen to him. But sooner or later they're gonna realize it's not just one businessman. It's the class of business people that's the problem. And they're all linked to the state apparatus, which is the main weapon that they wield in order to maintain their properties. That is basically, it's a summed up theory of Marxism, and the theory of Marxism.
The thing is that because there isn't a conscious revolutionary party at the head of this movement, the movement can go very far, but it can be also diverted in all sorts of ways, as we have seen in Nepal, in Bangladesh, and in Sri Lanka. And I think that it's possible also that in Madagascar, I mean, things change hour by hour and day by day when there is a revolutionary situation. But there is a possibility that somehow the president is removed. This is quite likely, I'd say. And then is replaced by some other neutral figure. I don't know, someone from the church or some independent lawyer or some figure that's not completely tainted with the power.
Liberal.
And then they may bring even some of the student leaders on board, as they did in Bangladesh. But the problem is that unless the capitalist system, which is at the root of these economic problems, the water and electricity cutoffs and so on, unless the capitalist system is abolished, then you can have a clean government or government with very good intentions that comes to power and then doesn't solve anything. And if
On that note, I'll see you tomorrow. Please like, share, and subscribe. Excuse me, sir. Remember, reform doesn't work, only revolution.